Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and we got some pretty interesting news out of Santa Clara Niners HQ today as the San Francisco 49ers have announced they completed interviews with former defensive coordinator and former Jets head coach Robert Saleh for their vacant defensive coordinator position. They also interviewed Lions passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach Deshea Townsend. So 2 interviews done today as the San Francisco 49ers try to fill their defensive coordinator role and position. I want to ask you to like, share, subscribe, leave that review on the audio podcasting platforms, and let's dive into the news that happened at Niners HQ today, and let's break down what Saleh or Townsend could mean for the San Francisco 49ers defense. Now, to clarify, both these interviews were done virtually. They were not done in person at the Niners facilities. It also means because both Saleh and Townsend are minorities that the Niners have satisfied the Rooney Rule requirement. I don't think they really care about that in regards to having to find a minority to fill that role, but that's done. It's out of the way. And it seems like, if you believe the reports already out there via Josina Anderson, the San Francisco 49ers want to bring back Robert Saleh as their defensive coordinator in 2025. It does feel like that he is the favorite. And if you listen to what ESPN's Dan Graziano said earlier, I think it was yesterday, the San Francisco 49ers and Robert Saleh had mutual interest, and it's basically a waiting game between San Francisco and Saleh. Saleh has 2 head coaching positions or interviews lined up for him later on in the week. He'll interview with the Jacksonville Jaguars, I believe, today. And then he'll interview with the Las Vegas Raiders, I think, in the next week or so for their vacant head coach position. So the Niners find themselves in this kind of in-between spot. They want to bring back Robert Saleh, at least that's what the indication is, but they have to wait for him to finish his head coaching interviews, and it's not to say there won't be more added along the way for Saleh. So they want to bring him back, but they're waiting to see what happens with him. That does lead them down this winding road of potentially being kind of led on by Robert Saleh, although probably unintentional. Let's say this thing drags out and he becomes a finalist for multiple jobs, and San Francisco sitting here, let's say in February, in March, maybe even in April if things go that long, although that's the draft time, so I doubt it carries on that far. San Francisco could find themselves essentially being hung out to dry, not getting the guy they want. An argument is to be made that San Francisco should be proactive in their defensive coordinator search. And maybe if Saleh is going to be a finalist for a handful of jobs, start to look elsewhere. Other names on the market are Lou Anarumo of the Cincinnati Bengals, or at least prior to his offseason. He got fired this year. There is Brandon Staley, who's already in-house. They can look towards Dennis Allen, former Saints head coach, Gus Bradley, former Colts defensive coordinator, and obviously Saleh, Jeff Ulbrich, and Deshea Townsend today. But the overwhelming consensus from fans seems to be everybody wants Robert Saleh back. Everybody believes that Saleh can fix the San Francisco 49ers defense. But we also have some comments here in the YouTube chat saying, by Niner Media, first off, what's going on? Second off, he says, I don't want Saleh if we're going to lose him after 1 to 2 seasons. That seems to be the overwhelming, I guess you can say, like the one knock on Robert Saleh is that, okay, you sign him to a new contract, bring him back to San Francisco, but in a year or two, he'll be gone. In a year or two, if he's already getting head coaching opportunities or interviews this year, this offseason, what's to make him stay after 2025? If you're the San Francisco 49ers, maybe you value the longevity or the having someone in-house for a couple of years before losing them inevitably once again. I think for San Francisco, the last 2 years they fired Steve Wilkes and they demoted Nick Sorensen. You want to have continuity. That was the beautiful thing with going from Saleh all the way to DeMeco Ryans. There was this, schematic mentality continuity with those two people that you can see carried over. That's the reason why they didn't miss a step from Saleh to DeMeco Ryans. And you can argue that Ryans had a better 2-year stint than Saleh's, was it 4-year, 5-year stint from 2017 to 2020, because personnel's better for sure, but the continuity is there. Younger players grew into their roles, so it's really important to have continuity with your young players. I think of Renardo Green, Lenore, Malik Mustafa, Jair Brown, even younger guys you draft this year. You want to have that group, the next chunk of stars you hope can butt into the core of your defense, have that same leader that is pushing them day in, day out to hopefully continue and be the next great Niners defense of the future. The last thing you want is to have a guy come in after already having two previous guys come in and be one and done or two and done. You want to have someone in there for the next 4 or 5 seasons, hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe even longer if you can make that happen. That's why I think the Niners have to play this very smartly. Yes, I get the connection to Saleh. I understand the emotional connection to him, this unfinished business style of, I guess you can say, like, motto, if you will, which there certainly is unfinished business. I would love to see Saleh come back and win a Super Bowl here with Kyle Shanahan and a lot of the same defensive stars. That said, I think it would benefit San Francisco to look at not just an unproven, say, position coach like Deshea Townsend, but maybe look for a failed former head coach, not like Saleh, but like, say, a Dennis Allen, like, say, maybe a Jeff Ulbrich, who Ulbrich's value really isn't as high, his stock really isn't as high as Saleh, and they run similar schemes. They can even look for maybe this like only defensive coordinator like Lou Anarumo or Matt Eberflus, who failed elsewhere, but their defenses were really strong as head coaches. And in Anarumo's case, him getting canned from the Cincinnati Bengals this past year, I think it might help them to kind of get this like overwhelming mastermind of defense play caller compared to having a person like Saleh come in that may be here for 1 to 2 seasons, but doesn't view the Bay as a long-term destination for their career. That said, a lot to like from the idea of bringing Saleh back to the Bay. If you look at what happened last year with Nick Sorensen, you saw a drastic fall off from 2023. And even then, 2023 really didn't see the heights that the Saleh/Ryans regime or tenures gave the Niners defense. But this past year under Sorensen, the San Francisco 49ers saw their sack total and takeaways drop by double-digit points. They also gave up nearly 125 rushing yards per game. If you think back to what Saleh did with the Niners, they never gave up over 116 yards per game. That's despite being in a 2-year rebuild in 2017, 2018, and shockingly exploding into a juggernaut in 2019. And even then, the terrible 2020 season, the defense still performed extremely well against the run. So I know Saleh's defense, cover 3 wide 9, 4-3 style, usually doesn't fare well against the run schematically, but history would prove otherwise, that Saleh would be a drastic improvement from Nick Sorensen in what the Niners saw last year from their defense. But let's be honest here. We all know who Robert Saleh is. We all love Robert Saleh. One other problem may arise is money. I'm not exactly sure how much they're willing to pay Saleh. Usually you don't get head coaches or coordinators' salaries revealed, which is fine. I wouldn't want you to know my salary either. That said, maybe it comes down to money. Maybe it comes down to fit, but I don't see that being a major factor. I think if the mutual interest report is believed to be true, it seems to be the case that Saleh is just hearing things out from the Raiders and Jaguars. Then moving on to Saleh. And while, yes, Tommy Huxley points out here, there is no salary cap for coaches, there isn't one, but when the ownership group is paying out loads of guaranteed money to Christian McCaffrey and eventually Brock Purdy and Lenore and Kittle and Trent Williams and so many other stars in this team. Sometimes they want to be a little fickle and penny pinch with the coaching staff, but Tommy Huxley also says here, pay that man whatever he wants when it comes to Robert Saleh. I do want to transition, though, into Deshea Townsend. Not many people know who he is. In fact, there was no reports prior to today stating they were bringing in another person to interview. The only connective tissue we've seen to maybe an outside person was Robert Saleh. And even on the inside, it was just Brandon Staley, who seems to be getting a courtesy interview from Kyle Shanahan, which in regards to Brandon Staley, I don't want to say this. I don't want it to become, go into the ether and become reality, but I would not be shocked to hear that Staley at the end of the day becomes a finalist for a job in San Francisco, but I don't think he'd be the best person for that. People often forget, though, and kind of look past his 2020 with the Rams because they go, he was terrible with the Chargers. That I will say, sometimes the best failed head coaches are the greatest defensive coordinators. Spagnuolo, Robert Saleh, Matt Eberflus, Dennis Allen. That said, I don't love what Staley has done, but even then, if the only role he filled this year was the assistant defensive coordinator and the kind of nickelbacks coach, which is what he was said to be kind of targeting and focused on during the preseason and training camp, they got a lot of production from their secondary this year, not in regards to takeaways, but Renardo Green was awesome. Lenore was incredible. I know there was a lack of production from Charvarius Ward. I'll kind of chalk that up to off the field issues. But even then, Isaac Yiadom, he wasn't great. He also wasn't very good, but he wasn't like piss poor. I think a lot of the issues San Francisco saw this year was a lot of front seven problems. Devondre Campbell, even though D. Winters was phenomenal in coverage, a lot of run defense issues, and a lot of miscommunication this year from the defense. But moving on to Deshea Townsend and kind of looking at this unknown person who interviewed today, I'm sure many of you don't know who he was. So I took a deep dive right after I had heard the news and was like, look, how can I get everything I need to know about Deshea Townsend before he maybe becomes the next defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers? I think it's important to look at the track record of Deshea Townsend. With him being so unknown, would it shock you to say, or would it shock me to say that he's got about 27 years of NFL/college experience? He played 13 years in the NFL. He was a two-time Super Bowl champion cornerback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which tells you almost everything you need to know about the mindset Deshea Townsend has. Obviously, things change over time, but when you hear a defensive player from the Pittsburgh Steelers wants to be a defensive coordinator, I think a lot of people lean to yes, because he played during the Cowher and the Tomlin eras in Pittsburgh. He won 2 Super Bowls there, and we all know what those defenses were like. James Harrison, Larry Foote, many, many other great players, Trey Polamalu, Ike Taylor, and many others. That defense ate up opposing offenses almost every single game. When they were on ESPN Monday Night Football against the Ravens, it was must-watch television. It was like you were watching a throwback style of football. And I think that Townsend would bring that physicality. Obviously, the NFL is different in 2024 and 2025, but I think when you have a player that has learned in and throughout those regimes, that mentality sticks with you. That the way you play football, the way you coach football sticks with you. And I think you do see that with the Detroit Lions this year, albeit again, in a more 2025 version of the NFL. You do see how physical they are. And even then, they're banged up to hell right out there in Detroit, and their defense is still playing relatively well with what they have to work with. They've lost Aiden Hutchinson, Aleem McNeil, plenty of cornerbacks this year that they kind of paid to be, big-time players for them. Anzalone just came back off the broken forearm. They've had to deal with their fair share of injuries, and the defense, albeit at times, has looked kind of like some cheese, some Swiss cheese, they've really been able to kind of stay afloat and make their defense play phenomenal. If you go back and watch that game against the Vikings in Week 18, their red zone defense was phenomenal. Now, he's not calling plays per se, but he is their passing game coordinator. And when you look at what Deshea Townsend has done this year as the Lions passing game coordinator, the Lions lead the NFL. They are the top defense in football when it comes to allowing a passer rating. The passer rating allowed this year is 82. That is, and they have the fourth best defensive DVOA in football against the pass. So what he's been able to do is simply shut out opposing quarterbacks, maybe outside of Brock Purdy, who had 371 yards against them in week, what was that, 17? It's really been a great job by Deshea Townsend, what he's been able to do. And I think with the personnel San Francisco's hopefully bringing back in 2025 and maybe adding throughout the draft and free agency, there's a lot to like from a coordinator or defensive coach that we didn't know much about before today. There is more news in regards to him, though. A lot of people, and this goes back to what Kyle Shanahan had to say yesterday when it came to what he's looking for in his next defensive coordinator. And I quote, "I'm not saying you've got to change schemes, but you have to have the ability, the history, and the knowledge of how to change some stuff up when you're in some certain situations." And I think that we do need more of that going forward. That was not exactly, we got to go to a cover one scheme or more man coverage heavy scheme. It's more so about Shanahan saying, look, opposing offenses may have caught on to what we're doing defensively. The scheme still works, but how do we change in critical situations on crucial third downs in the red zone? What can we do differently to help us and separate us from the rest of the pack? And I think you talk about the zigging and zagging of the Niners in the past couple of years. Hiring Deshea Townsend would be a complete and utter zag compared to a zig that the Niners, I think, maybe could or should do. Now, I would not pick Deshea Townsend to be my defensive coordinator amongst the other candidates out there, but I do think when you look at what he's done this year with the Lions, they led the league in man coverage rate this season. I think you can trust Renardo Green and Lenore to play man coverage, but that would mean getting and trusting your safeties, getting better coverage, nickelbacks, and the third cornerback has to become better as well. Townsend also held the defensive backs and passing game coordinator role for the Jacksonville Jaguars the last 2 years, or excuse me, in 2023 and 2022. And even then, they were the fourth in man coverage rate that year. And this year with the Lions rate 8th in the NFL when it comes to blitzing on passing downs. So not to say it screams Steve Spagnuolo, because we have no idea what Townsend would look like as a play caller, but you can tell that Townsend does kind of get that mentality of, I don't mind playing man coverage. I want to blitz you. I want to make sure your quarterback can feel the pressure coming from every which direction, whether it is defensive backs, linebackers. I want to make them feel the presence and pressure of our defense day in and day out. And again, when you look at where he's played with the Pittsburgh Steelers, that screams a Bill Cowher defense, and also where he's played or where he's coached in previous tenures. I think the Niners, it would benefit them this year to get a seasoned defensive coordinator. Sometimes young guys are great. They're flashy. They can do new things. And it's never bad to have this like upstart, look at this like young protege that has this great mind. And we're seeing so much of that on the offensive side of things in recent years. I do think we have seen that these grizzled, veteran, seasoned defensive coordinators can kind of offset and kind of stymie and limit and frustrate a lot of these like up and coming geniuses, Bobby Slowick, LaFleur, Shanahan, McVay, many, many others, of course, across the league. But I think you're seeing that these defensive coordinators that have lived through and played through almost every single other scheme in football do have the ability to frustrate many great offensive minds in football. And when you look at where Townsend is coached in his career, so he's played 13 years in the NFL. After he retired, he's been coaching the last 14 years. He coached with the Arizona Cardinals, went to Mississippi State, Tennessee Titans, New York Giants, Chicago Bears, Jacksonville Jaguars, and now the Detroit Lions. That is 6 different NFL destinations and a college destination as well. Tommy Huxley says here in the YouTube chat, Brian Flores is going to take McVay to the woodshed. Brian Flores took Kyle Shanahan to the woodshed. Mike McDonald took almost every single Shanahan-like scheme last year to the woodshed. And obviously, things are different this year, but there's a reason to believe that hiring someone of the ilk or the lineage that Townsend possesses would actually benefit San Francisco more than, say, hiring a Robert Saleh. And it's not to say that I don't like Saleh. It isn't to say that I'm not, I'm not against hiring Robert Saleh. I want to get that out there. I like Bobby Saleh. How do you not? But I do think San Francisco should be looking for something different. I think that hiring Saleh, which would still be a great move, may be a little too safe for the San Francisco 49ers. I think that hiring Steve Wilks was kind of the first inkling of, I want to do something different from Kyle, but you can tell it frustrated him so much. He was like making a decision, but wasn't really bought in totally with it. And there were so many great things that Wilks did, but ultimately there were too many critical issues they had on defense. Whereas Sorensen was the fallback, safe option. It was like, what are we doing here? You missed on Belichick. You didn't get Ulbrich, and really became your third choice. And they even tried to get Steve Spagnuolo last year. That to me screams, if you wanted Belichick and Spagnuolo last year, why shouldn't that same, I guess you could say, desire carry over in 2025? There's a reason they fired Nick Sorensen. Yes, there were obviously some issues they had on third downs and on fourth downs and in the red zone, but with what Kyle said, there's a reason why they demoted Nick Sorensen and didn't fire him. There's also a reason as to why they felt this was the best opportunity they had to improve their defense via the defensive coordinator spot. There's so many great minds out there on the open market. And I don't want fans to hyperfixate on, you got to get Robert Saleh. If they don't get Robert Saleh, I can't believe this. Okay, fine. You can have your guy. I'm not saying don't. I have my favorite guy. I'll reveal him later this week. That said, I think it's really important to understand there are so many great defensive minds out there. I've already mentioned a lot of them. Matt Eberflus, I think, is an under-the-radar guy they can go pick up. The Bears fired him. Their defense tanked. Anarumo from the Bengals, albeit wouldn't be my favorite choice. I think what he's been able to do in Cincinnati the previous couple of seasons was astonishing. He remade that entire defense and was a massive reason as to why they went to the Super Bowl in 2021, which should have been Niners versus Bengals, and you would have seen him up close and personal out there in LA at SoFi. There also is people like Dennis Allen, who I get he has ties to the Bay and the Raiders when they were in Oakland, and there seems to be this like, he was a failed head coach, he must suck. It's not true. Really not true. I think San Francisco, mainly Kyle Shanahan and maybe even John Lynch, feel the need to find a guy that can be here for a handful of seasons, a guy that has seen and done everything in the book, and also can be trusted to be able to schematically go toe-to-toe with these so many great offenses currently in the NFL. Like, you have to face McVay every single year. They're going to have to face whoever the Seattle Seahawks find as their next OC. The Cardinals are not a great team, but their offense can give San Francisco fits. And even then, like, the Buccaneers have a good offensive coordinator, albeit don't have the greatest personnel. But even then, San Francisco didn't play them with Chris Godwin or Mike Evans. You have to go against Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes. If you want to win a Super Bowl, I get it. You got to have a great offense to get there. But when it comes down to winning, I know that great quarterbacks usually win, but you really just have to have a great defense that can be great on third downs, that can be great in the red zone. And that was the exact opposite San Francisco had this year. And obviously, this year was not going to go their way with a great defense or not. But I think San Francisco has witnessed Steve Spagnuolo just stymie their offense multiple times, give them fits. That's why I think you have to go out and find somebody not like Robert Saleh. Not to say that Saleh couldn't be successful. He's better than Nick Sorensen, but I do think even then there's better options out there. But I know many of you out there really want Robert Saleh. I cannot tell you how many people have been in my mentions on Twitter, on Threads, on Instagram, every single article I write for theheavy.com talking about Robert Saleh does bonker numbers because every Niner fan, most Niner fans want Robert Saleh back. It is this emotional attachment to him and obviously success. Like when you see the success he's had in San Francisco, in New York when he was there as a head coach, like it's hard not to want that back. I just really don't want fans to be like, it's Saleh or nothing. It's not true. I think we have to be more open to other people. We have to be more open to, like Tommy Huxley says here, Eberflus is a great defensive coordinator. I'll take him over Ulbrich. And I think a lot of Niner fans, and maybe I'm wrong here, so in the comments, correct me if I am wrong. It seems like there is this Robert Saleh or bust mentality, and it feels like if they don't get Saleh, people be mad and frustrated, but then it turns to Ulbrich. You have to get Ulbrich next. It feels like those two jet guys the Niners have been tied to for a handful of years and even had here in previous times. Like it's one of those two guys or nobody else. And it's like, I don't even think Ulbrich would be the best option here. I think a lot of the context gets lost with Ulbrich and Saleh with the Jets. Like, don't forget, and this is not diminishing anything either one of them did, but Ulbrich has been calling defensive plays for the Jets since 2021. Like, he's been doing it for a long time, and people look at the numbers. Oh, when Saleh got fired, the defense fell apart. Yeah, it did, because Ulbrich then had to stop calling defensive plays. Like, there was a massive problem, like, with the Jets last year. I mean, their owner was using Madden ratings to go get players and make trades, so that's kind of all you got to say about that. But I want to ask you, like, do you want to sign or hire Robert Saleh? Is that the one guy of the people out there that you can sign or hire on the open market? Which defensive coordinator do you want? It kind of feels like that a lot of fans just want Saleh, whereas it's like we don't even care about Dennis Allen or Eberflus or Gus Bradley, if you will. Like, it feels like everybody just wants Saleh and nobody else. I also think that what Saleh has done with the Jets, it can't be erased, but I do think that many people get blinded by what he's done with the Jets. Looking at my notes here, is it worth really going back to a 4-3 defense with a cover 3 secondary, playing mainly zone? Like so many Niner fans have been clamoring for something different. Now, that usually means offensively. That usually means firing Kyle Shanahan or just making different decisions. But for the fans that have been saying, I want something different, it seems to be that same group saying, go get Robert Saleh, which would be the exact opposite of different. It'd be the exact same thing. And it seems like San Francisco is okay doing that, but I just like trying to make sense of like, where do we sit as a fan base? Where does the organization currently stand when it comes to, do you want to zig while somebody else zags, or do you want to kind of get back to where you were, the basics, if you will? Because if anything, You go from Steve Wilkes to Nick Sorensen. That's the back to basics move. It's the fallback option. Get back to who you were. Then it's we fire or we demote Sorensen and let's go get Saleh, who will run almost the exact same system as Sorensen, but is a better defensive mind, a better play caller. Like, is that okay with you? Or do you want this team to go out there and do something entirely different? Because you can't have it both ways. You either got to do something very different or stick to the same thing, which we've seen in previous years have very consistent results, but not giving San Francisco the result they've been wanting the entire time. Looking at the rest, I guess you can say, of the remaining options for defensive coordinator, like what would make you say no to somebody like Lou Anarumo, the former Bengals defensive coordinator, who's like an ultimate, top tier game planner, but he doesn't run this 4-3 scheme. He does something very different. Obviously, there's fears of how do your players fit into that, but he runs a 4-2 scheme, not a 4-3 scheme. He runs with a nickel-based package 90% of the time, it feels like. But if you can put your guys in the right place at the right time, make the right play call here or there, is that better? Or do you just want the feels of Robert Saleh back in San Francisco? Round 2, baby, here we go. It kind of feels like people want the latter. Or say a player, or not a player, but a coach like Matt Eberflus, who doesn't mind running cover 3, but also wants to do cover 2, wants to go zone, wants to go man. We'll do all these different things. If it's me, I want somebody that can do anything to stop the opponent. And at times, while Saleh has been an incredible defensive play caller, a great coordinator, it does feel like that there have been some issues. Don't forget, Saleh and his defense, for as great as it was, and it doesn't just go for his defense, but a lot of defenses too, it had a really hard time stopping mobile quarterbacks. Now, the NFL obviously adapts and whatnot, but I'd rather have a defensive coordinator that is calling plays, that's a top-tier game planner, that I believe can go toe-to-toe, can match up, and then can make my defense play whatever the game dictates. That is what makes the Chiefs so great. Steve Spagnuolo is not afraid to play 4-man fronts, 6-man fronts, 3-man fronts, and play 4-2, play 4-3, play 3-4. Like, he'll do all these things and then also play man coverage. He'll utilize the blitz. He'll use defensive back splits. He'll drop a safety. He'll do all these different things. And it almost makes beating that defense impossible because they're giving you so many different looks. They have misdirections. They can mask and disguise their blitzes. There's so many things that Steve Spagnuolo does and Brian Flores has done with the Vikings this year that that makes it so tough for offenses to really get momentum. Go watch the Niners play the Vikings this past year. I wouldn't put a lot of the blame on Brock Purdy, but some of it certainly has to be there. The way Brian Flores put Brock Purdy in the spin cycle, he had no idea where the pressure was coming from this year. Now, you're not going to go get Brian Flores, but I'm saying is that you have to have that defensive mind in this day and age that can literally do everything. We want all of our head coaches, all of our players to be 5-tool players. You want to have the speed, the athleticism, the arm, the mental strength. Like, everybody wants to have Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. I think we should be looking, and it's way easier said than done, but you have to almost take that exact same, I guess you can say, like, structure you want for your star players and push that into the coaching conversation. And I think that while Saleh is so great, I think that there would be a limiting factor into how much this defense could run next year and even beyond. And even then, he might be gone in 1 year's time too. Like, let's say he comes back to San Francisco and the Niners have a great year, go to the playoffs, NFC Championship game, deep playoff run. Say they even go to the Super Bowl and they lose again. Well, there'd be so many other domino effects to that. Let's say that happens. You cannot tell me, you can promise me that Saleh comes back in 2026. Like that is a, oh my goodness, we are XYZ team. We're the Colts, and Richardson's a bust, and Steichen's not getting it done. Let's get Saleh in here, change the culture, and figure things out defensively. Like that kind of feels like that would happen instantly. Or other teams would hire him. The Dolphins would do it. You look at teams out there in the AFC South. The Jaguars already maybe won him. You have teams like the Titans, who are a mess currently. Maybe they'd get Saleh. Want this like leader of men style of coach. So there is kind of that mentality, or there is that possibility, excuse me. But even then, one of the biggest things I can praise Robert Saleh for, and it has absolutely nothing to do with his play calling, nothing to do with, the way he schemes up games. I think a lot of people love the optics that signing Robert Saleh brings. Fans have been begging and have been yelling and screaming because they want to have their defensive coordinator, one, on the sideline, but two, they want to see the emotions, him yelling at Nick Bosa, getting fired up. Everybody loved to see Robert Saleh jacked out of his mind, bald head on the sidelines, going berserk after every single sack, after every single takeaway. People love that stuff. And they didn't have that with Steve Wilks. They didn't really get that with DeMeco Ryans, albeit it was more so than Wilks. And it was not even existent with Nick Sorensen. I think a lot of the Saleh or bust kind of, I guess you can say, thought process is really just, he was great when he was here. There's an emotional attachment to him, and what he exudes through that television screen is infectious. You'd kind of get this, I guess you can say, the energy back on defense where certain players bring it. Greenlaw brings it, Warner brings it, but you'd get that from Bosa again. You get that from Hufanga if he comes back next year, and you get younger players like Jair Brown, Mustafa, Green, Lenore, all those guys pumped up, ready to go, which I don't know how much it actually impacts the game itself, but I think a lot of people want to see that through the screen when they're watching on Fox on Sundays or on ESPN on Mondays or even Amazon Prime. When you're falling asleep listening to Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit almost mess up every single name, they cut the Saleh screaming. You're like, oh, here we go. We're alive, right? I think people want to see that, and people want to feel that. People love the connection Saleh brings to the defense, which I can't say I don't either. I love that stuff. I just think that the rah-rah stuff can be a little overrated. I'd rather have the results, and Saleh certainly brings both of them, but I do think there's avenues to a better result with a little less, I don't want to call it cheerleading, but a little less yelling and screaming, if you will, on the sideline. But again, all that to say, I really love Robert Saleh. If they sign him and they hire him back, awesome, cool. Would I go elsewhere? Yes, I certainly have my choice, but even then, I could also be wrong, and they can be holding a Lombardi trophy after next season. But I don't know. We're all sitting here kind of waiting. But tell me down below in the comments, what do you make of this team interviewing Robert Saleh and Deshea Townsend? Would you want this team? Are you on the bandwagon, on the train, saying Saleh or bust this year? Or are you intrigued by a coach like Deshea Townsend, current Lions passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach who has a plethora of knowledge, 27 years playing and coaching combined, multiple stops, brings that Pittsburgh Steeler kind of defense. He likes to blitz, and they have been phenomenal out there in the Motor City at stopping opposing quarterbacks this year. The lowest passer rating allowed at 82 against opposing quarterbacks, and the fourth best DVOA against passing offenses with the Lions this year. Who would you want? Who would you like? And yes, Tommy, I get it. Townsend's never called plays. I totally get that. I would not hire him, but I do think there is some intriguement. Is that a word, intriguement? Whatever. There is some intriguing things to like from Deshea Townsend, but tell me who your choice for defensive coordinator would be down below. Also, stay tuned. Later this week, hint, hint, probably on Saturday morning, come right back here. I'll be giving you my top 7 picks for the defensive coordinator job, and I'll reveal my number 1 choice, my pick to be the San Francisco 49ers' next defensive coordinator in 2025 and hopefully beyond, that can maybe push this team past and into the Super Bowl. You're going to guess Robert Saleh? I don't know about that. You'll have to come back here, Tommy, and see this Saturday. I want to thank Tommy Huxley, Papa J, Bobo, Tribe, 49er Media, and many more you hear on the YouTube chat. If you're listening and watching later, again, comment down below who your choice would be for the San Francisco 49ers' next defensive coordinator in 2025. And tell me down below, are you intrigued by Deshaun Watson potential hiring next season? We'll see how it goes. Kawachipto says here, they aren't going to hire you as defensive coordinator. Come on now, Sterling. I'm not going to put my hat in the ring, but I tell you this, who I'm picking, I think everybody will universally like once you hear my pitch on him this weekend. But don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave that review on the audio podcasting platforms. Follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X or Twitter. 49ers.access is the Instagram. And if you want to go to a baseball game, NBA game, if you want to pay the big bucks to go watch the NFL playoffs this year live in person, go to SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off your first purchase using promo code 49ersaccess, 49ERSACCESS at SeatGeek.com. You can also go to SportsSpyder.com for your team's latest news, podcast, and articles. Click that link down below in the description or go to SportsSpyder.com. That's all I have for you today. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Stay tuned for my defensive coordinator rankings this weekend. And as always, my name is Sterling Bennett. And until next time, stay faithful.